Well, this morning we are pleased to have with us Rabbi David Zaslow, and he's speaking on a topic that I find really interesting, Jewish spiritual practices. David has been a rabbi at the synagogue in Ashland, Oregon, where he has lived since 1970. And he's been the rabbi at this particular temple for 30 years. He's also a very accomplished and published author and has been given several kudos for his writing. And we are pleased to have him today. I understand we learned of his existence through Evelyn Meisner, who heard him speak when she was in Oregon. So we're certainly grateful to have a newbie on board who is going to share his perspective with us. David, welcome to Center for Universal Oneness.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for hosting this. Really appreciated it. I loved hearing your mission statement. As Rabbi Sue and I can attest, the movement we belong to is called Jewish Renewal and is very much, not very much, completely aligned with your mission statement. For too long in Western civilization, God was seen as out there. We pray to God rather than seeing that we're each divine beings and that there's a spark of God within every person. In fact, in Judaism, that's always been a concept, but it's always been kind of a minority concept on the sidelines of monotheism because of the fear of individuals, a narcissism taking over, and people just because God dwells within you, it doesn't mean that you're God. You're the only God. There's a lot of other gods out there, and we're all in this together. And so the idea of the spark of God indwelling in every one of us is very much a notion in Jewish renewal, and I would say historically in Jewish spirituality in the form of Jewish mysticism throughout the ages. I'm really glad to introduce also my colleague, Rabbi Sue Morningstar, who's joining us this morning. And Sue, you have permission. You can unmute anytime if you want to add something to what I'm saying. I'd be honored to hear your voice.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to put up a song. It's really a prayer song. It's from Psalm 133. And it's one that's really very universally known in the Jewish world. And it really expresses a lot about our theology. And the words in Hebrew go, Hine matov umanaim shevet achim gam yachad. And I'll do it in English first and then in Hebrew. And it means, behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers, but it also means sisters or friends or neighbors, can dwell together in unity. So it goes like this. Hine matov umanaim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanaim shevet achim gam yachad. Behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers can dwell together. Behold how good and pleasant it is when sisters can dwell together. In unity to dwell in unity, in unity to dwell in unity. Hine matov umanaim shevet achim gam yachad. Behold how good and pleasant it is when we all can dwell together in unity to dwell in unity, in unity to dwell in unity. Kind of a prophetic prayer about the unity, right? It's really beautiful. What I love about that, actually, I want to do a screen share one more time. I want to share with you because this really can begin my talk with this idea in terms of understanding Judaism and Jewish spirituality. It says Hine matov umanaim, which it means behold how good and how pleasant it is. Now, why do you have to have both words, good and pleasant? And one of our commentators, one of our great rabbis said, well, some things are good, but they're not very pleasant. Some things are pleasant, but they're really not very good. Like, for example, tov, let's say, would be, let's say a medicine that has a lot of healing power, that medicine, but it just doesn't taste too well, right? So you take a tablespoon of the medicine, and it just yucky, but you know it's tov, it's good. What about naim? That's pleasant. Well, some things are pleasant. They may not be really that good for you. I don't want to get in trouble with chocolate lovers, but I'll use chocolate as an example. So chocolate is naim, it's pleasant, but a little too much may not be good for you. So we look for a balance between tov and naim, that which is good and that which is pleasant. What's incredible also in this little one line is that it says, behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers, sisters, shevet achim gam yachad, when they can dwell together in unity. What's incredible about it is because throughout much of human history, certainly Jewish history, certainly the history of any religion, people did not dwell together in unity, right? There was fighting and infighting and intertribal disputes and disagreements. And so King David is celebrating, behold, this is good and pleasant when people can dwell together in unity. And certainly I know that's our prayer for the whole world today. Isn't it yours in St. Louis, for Israel, for the Middle East, for Ukraine, for the whole world that's suffering under oppression, that the world should not only be free, but will able to be see that brothers and sisters can dwell together in unity. So that's my intention, is to dedicate what we're doing today, our learning, to peace in the world and to peace between brothers and sisters. Now, to understand Judaism and Jewish spiritual practices, we have to go back to the most ancient of all spiritual practices. Before there was monotheism, before there was polytheism, before there was religion, there was spiritual depth. Our most ancient brothers and sisters who live in the most, not just indigenous tribal lives, but the most, you may even use the word primitive, primal lives. Their spiritual practice was what anthropologists call animism. They didn't have gods and goddesses necessarily. They saw everything as being alive. In fact, that'll be part of our meditation later, is really just imagining that when you're walking in the forest or taking a walk by the river, that you could see that the ripples are each a voice of God speaking to you. And you look in the sky and the clouds, that everything is alive, that everything is a voice, and that everything is speaking to each of us. This animism is an ancient practice that sadly too much of the whole world, Western and the Eastern world, has given up as, well, that's just primitive. But I want to propose that animism is something that we need to return to. We need to be able to have like with a computer, you want the old software to be able to work with the new software. That ancient indigenous software of animism, seeing the world alive, is an incredible gift that I bless us all to be able to recover in our own lives. Going outside, seeing everything is alive. And now what started happening very quickly is that people started organizing patterns within the animate world. And this is where the idea of gods and goddesses start coming in. So let's take a leap up to polytheism. So 10, 15,000 years ago, this notion that the world can be divided into the four God forces, the gods and goddesses of earth, the gods and goddesses of water, the gods and goddesses of air, and the gods and goddesses of fire. And basically, whether you're looking at Nordic stories, or whether you're looking at Middle Eastern stories or African stories, the mythos of the people all had to do with all the gods and goddesses representing these energetic forces, which are projections of our own personality types. And so this personality that we each have, we're all divided into earth, water, air, and fire, just in terms of our bodies, our skeletal system, our water systems, our air systems, respiratory system, and our minds, the fire systems. So these four systems in the human being are reflected in nature as earth, water, air, and fire. And to the early polytheists, it's not that they were wrong in describing the gods and goddesses. What happened next, under the direction of Abraham and Melchizedek, his teacher, because certainly Abraham was not the first monotheist. There was monotheism way, way before Abraham, but he organized the thoughts that all the different gods and goddesses of earth, water, air, and fire, all the gods and goddesses were really part of a singularity, that they were all true, they were all real, but they were also all deeply interconnected. So monotheism just takes a look at this one God as not eliminating the other gods and goddesses, but as integrating them in a singularity. So just like my body is a whole, I still have those four parts of me, my skeletal system, my water systems, air systems, fire systems. They're still within me, even though they're all integrated into this one being that I call David, or the other being in front of me that's each and every one of you. So polytheism takes a look at the four gods and goddesses in their separate forces. Monotheism brings them all together. In fact, as Rabbi Sue will attest, one of the names that we have for God is Elohim. And Elohim actually means, don't tell anybody, it means gods. It's plural, right? It's translated in almost all translations as God, because the translators are afraid that we're so ignorant that we're going to move back into polytheism. But it really means Elohim means the integrated poly, the many, all interconnected as one. And that's why one of the most used names in Judaism of God, we have like 100 names for God in Hebrew, but one of the most commonly used is Elohim, understanding this plurality that comes together in a unity. So I took a course with a great religious historian named Houston Smith. I don't know if in college, if you ever read the textbooks of Houston Smith. Anybody here raise their hands if you know who Dr. Smith was. He wrote the textbook that's still used by freshmen and sophomores studying religion. Now look at those balloons. How did that happen? Did I do that? I got to learn how to use this Zoom more. But something happened and those balloons came up. Anyway, Dr. Houston Smith, I took a course from him, a 5-day course. And on the 50th, I said, Dr. Smith, where do you think religion is going now? So we're at this stage in monotheism where a lot of us are mystics and are looking at the divine within each and every one of us, the spark of the divine in every person. Where is religion going? He said it's very possible that religion is moving out of the monotheistic stage and going into what he called the monistic stage, not monotheism, but monism or monism. In other words, it's all God. It's all part of God. And as Rabbi Sue and I know, in our prayers, we have a special prayer at the end of every service that says, Ein od milvado, efes zulato. It's translated as, there are no other gods besides our God. But what it really is saying is there's nothing else but God. When you take a look at the language, you're going, wow, it's saying efes zulato, zero besides God. It's all God. So it's very possible our consciousness, God willing, is going to be able very, very soon to integrate this idea that we could see God within every one of us and not be feeding our narcissism, but feeding this sense of integration. That if I could look at the world and if I could see, as indigenous, let's say Native Americans do, if I could see that I'm a relative, I'm related to everything in nature, to the water, to the earth, to the wind, to every animal, that they're all my relations, right? If I could see the world that way, if I could look at you as members of the unity community in St. Louis, and you could look at me as a Jewish rabbi that way, and we see ourselves as integrated that way, we're moving towards monism. It doesn't mean we're going to lose individual religions. The rabbi, the Rebbe, the teacher that ordained Rabbi Sue and myself used the analogy of an orchestra, that every religion is like, each religion is one instrument playing in this orchestra, this symphony of life. And if you ever go to a symphony, I don't know if you like symphonies as much as I do, but you have your different musical sections. You have your string section. You have your large strings, the bass, the viola, the smaller ones, the violin. You have your wind instruments, the flutes, the clarinets. You have your percussion instruments. Every spiritual path is one instrument. And when we learn to play together, like we're doing this morning in a way, then that's the beauty of God inhabiting our lives. We're, so to speak, living out the dream of the prophets, that someday the world will come together in this unity, in this oneness. So that's the dream.
I've also heard that each religion is a different organ of the body, right? So some are the skin, some are the heart, some are the brain, and all together creates the beautiful human entity.
That's just beautiful, Rabbi. I wonder if that's a Reb Zalman one too. I mean, seeing the body is all the different parts. They don't work independently. My
Right.
heart, my lungs need my kidneys, right? The problem with religion is that each religion gets so egocentric that they believe, well, we're the real religion. This is really the truth. We're Christians, we're Muslims, whatever the religion is, and they call it triumphalism. Triumphalism has been terrible for the whole world since the dawn of colonialism. People believing that they could take over another religion and impose their religion because we're the best. It misses the point of what Rabbi Sue is talking about, of the organs in the body. It's missing the point of what I'm sharing with you about being members of the orchestra, each playing our own instrument. Rabbi Sue and I do a lot of interfaith work, and in my interfaith work, I do a lot with in the Muslim community, in the Native American community, and the Christian community. And I love going to Catholic services, to Episcopal services. I love teaching in a Methodist church. As different as their theology may be from mine, we try to realize how much we need each other. How in essence, we're really integrated together. So let's take a look at the next step here. Judaism can be divided. This is very simplistic. Abraham lived approximately 4,000 years ago. And if you said, are you Jewish, to Abraham or to his wife Sarah, they would have said, what? They never heard of Judaism. They were what's called Ivrim. And Ivrim means the people from the other side, or it means boundary crossers. I'm using the terms, the names of modern nations. These didn't exist at the time. But they were called by God in the book of Genesis to leave the land that they grew up in, which was modern-day Iraq and southern Syria, and to go to the land that I will show you, God says. And so they had to cross boundaries. Today they'd be crossing Iraq, Syria, Jordan, into the ancient land of Canaan. So these boundary crosses was this tribe of nomadic people who had this insight into the unity of God. Anyway, they go down to Egypt, they become enslaved. Again, I'm being very simplistic in the history, but 3,300 years ago comes the second phase. From the Hebrew phase, we go into the Israelite phase. And the Israelite phase, the word Yisrael means God wrestler, people who wrestle with God. And it comes from the story of Jacob.
I just want to interrupt for 1 second. That
please.
You didn't mention that Ivrim translates to Hebrews, right?
Thank you.
Ivrim Hebrew.
Thank you. You see, Doug, this is why I have to have her with me, because I'll leave out these important. So yes, so the name Hebrew means Ivrim, and these are the boundary crossers. So that's phase one. Phase two is the Israelite phase. And this really gives the character of the Jewish people today. We're what's called God wrestlers. If there's something, you'll notice that if you have Jewish friends, I don't mean this in a negative way, like we're argumentative, but we push back against if the status quo says we can't do this, a Jewish person by their nature will say, I know you can't do it, but let's see if we can. They'll push back against, in science, in music, in theology, how can we get something done? And that's why you find so many creative people coming out of this little minority of the Jewish world. Many of you might know the Jewish people in the whole world's population are just 16 million people. 16 million. There's like over 2 billion Christians. There's over 1 billion Muslims. So in the monotheistic faiths, Christianity 2 billion, Islam 1 billion, and the Jewish people are 16 million. It's almost like we have no right to call ourselves a major religion. We're a tiny little sect amongst all the world's religions compared to Hinduism and Buddhism. So, but what we find in the Jewish people is this desire to innovate. There's this great desire to be creative in many different ways in the world of theater, in our culture, in the world of Hollywood and movies, in the world of the arts, in the world of science. So the third phase comes a little later on after King David, down through Ezra and Nehemiah, the last of the prophets, probably about 2,300 years ago, let's say, begins the phase of we first see the word Judaism being used in the book of Daniel. And suddenly the Jewish people become, and the word Judaism comes from the name of the tribe Judah, which means gratitude. So the name of the Jewish people are ideally, we don't always do this, we don't always live up to our name, but we're the people who give gratitude, who are thankful. So our three phases, the boundary crosses, the Ivrim, the God wrestlers, right? I think I'm doing this with the balloons. It has to do with my fingers, right? I got to look at that. Shake your fingers, everybody. You got to try this. We're going to get some balloons. Maybe I just have the updated version. Okay.
It's only in the updated version.
Okay. Get an updated version, folks. So you too can have balloons. Okay. So, three phases. Ivrim, boundary crosses. Hebrews, the Israelites, the ones who wrestle with God. And the third phase is the people who give thanks. Now, we don't always live up to our name. Nobody does. Do you live up to the name Unity? Do Christians live up to their name? But at least it's aspirational. Okay. So Judaism is not a salvation-based religion like you have in Christianity. Christianity, in other words, if you accept, let's say, to take a mainstream Episcopal position or Catholic position, accepting the Lord Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and you have salvation. Judaism has nothing to do with salvation. Everybody is saved. You don't have to become any one religion to have salvation, right? Just like in unity, right? It's a silly notion to believe if you're not a member of unity, you're not going to heaven. And it certainly is seen that way within Judaism, that you don't have to be Jewish to have a place in the world to come. So it's not a salvation-based religion, but it is a covenant-based religion. And a covenant means, if you study the first 5 books of Moses, is that God is always appearing and saying, okay, guys and ladies and gentlemen, you do this, and then I'll do that, right? You make it a better world, and I'll sustain the world, but you got to make it a better world. Don't start a war and then pray for peace to me, because I'm not going to make the peace. I'm going to give you peace, and then you have to bring peace into the world. And that's a covenant. The covenant means it's a deal. Those of you who are married, you're in a covenantal relationship with your partner, right? He does this, you do that. She does this, you do that. However it is, a covenant is what we call a brit in Hebrew, and it means you have individual responsibilities. So we say to God, okay, God, you sustain the heavens and the stars and nature, and we'll make sure not to mess up the earth with ecological destruction. But God says, if you mess up the earth with ecological destruction, don't come to me and say, oh, Lord, clean up the earth. That's our job. So we see ourselves in this partnership with God, right? And that's a unique feature in Judaism. Wouldn't you say, Rabbi Sue, is this partnership?
Yes, and also I would say that we are not a proselytizing religion. So I just went out to dinner with a bunch of friends, and one of my friends ordered pork, and then she said, oh, you probably don't want me to be ordering pork. And I said, it doesn't matter to me that you're not a Jew. You don't need to follow my rules, and I'm not following your rules. We don't believe everyone should be Jewish, like you were saying, for salvation or redemption or any of that. We all have our role. We're all separate organs in the whole body of humanity. So yeah.
Thank you. And I think that's probably why we're such a small religion, is that we're not looking for converts. We're not proselytizing. And what we're looking for is to do our part, to be God wrestlers,
Right.
to try to make this world a better place, to innovate wherever we can. I'm going to open this up to questions in a little while. I want to be sensitive to time as well. Now, one of the great innovations, I would say, in Judaism is the ability to think beyond the boundaries of reason and to go into analogical thinking. Here's what I mean. Early Judaism was a temple-based religion where people came to Jerusalem and brought their physical offerings. When the temple was destroyed by the Romans, it wasn't the destruction of Judaism. We just took the idea of offerings, physical offerings that were brought to Jerusalem to feed the poor, to feed the priesthood, the animals, the grains, the fruit brought to Jerusalem. And we said, no, that's prayer. Today, the offerings we bring to God are the offerings of our lips, the offerings of our mouths. So it's a beautiful innovation to be able to say, you can't destroy us just by taking away the building. You just because you've taken over our beautiful building, the great temple in Jerusalem, it doesn't mean you're destroying Judaism, because our offerings to God are now our good deeds and the words of our mouths. Now, going along with that is this whole idea is that when we study the Torah or the Bible, we're not literalists. We interpret, we try to go deep into the words to see what the words are actually saying. So we have a beautiful interpretive tradition rather than a literalistic or a fundamentalist tradition. See, I'm doing this with the balloons again. I'm sorry. I'm having a good time with this, St. Louis. This is great. All right, just a moment. I'm going to open it if you have a question. I'm going to open it to questions before I do another song. And I realize our time is limited here. You know, I can go on for hours here, so I have to be very, very sensitive. When you study Judaism, you realize we have a beautiful history of understanding our ancestors are still alive. Angels are available to us. In the Jewish mystical tradition, our ancestors who've died did anybody ever see that animated film called Coco by Disney? Coco is just amazing. It's an animation. If you've got grandkids or kids, it's just beautiful, beautiful story of the Day of the Dead, where the ancestors are invoked in the Mexican Catholic tradition. I mean, it's really wonderful. It's not just a cartoon, right? It's really got some depth. And you very much see that. Anybody ever see Fiddler on the Roof, the film? You'll notice that there's a whole dream sequence where the ancestor is invoked. It's really, really, really wonderful tradition to believe and to know that our ancestors are still available to us. And we also believe in angels, that there's a sense that there's this subtle world beyond this physical world that still exists, and it's the world of angels and ancestors. Along with that, and I'm going to kind of sum it up here, is the idea that our job is to take this broken world and to do our part in repairing it. You find an inordinate, this I'm proud of, I'm not trying to be ethnocentric here, but you find an inordinate number of Jews who are lawyers, who are doctors, social workers, and teachers. All these groups help make it a better world. Teachers, social workers, doctors, lawyers are all trying to make it a better world. That doesn't mean there aren't bad Jewish doctors or bad Jewish lawyers, but in fact, Rabbi Sue's husband is my doctor. You know, try to make it a better world. And we call this tikkun olam, fixing the world. The world's messed up, don't get depressed, do something about it, fix it. And that's one of the reasons why you have this inordinate proportion of Jewish people who won Pulitzer Prizes, Nobel Peace Prizes, and we're trying to make it a better world. All right, let's see what else we want to. Oh yeah, I want to conclude with one thing and then open up to a few questions. Doug, would you give me a limit on time here? How long? Because I want to do the meditation soon. Should I start wrapping it up?
let's leave the questions to the end, David, and let's go ahead and do the meditation. And then we get to the coffee talk, we can do the questioning.
Oh, great. We'll do that. Okay. So let me just finish it up with one word here, which is called Shabbat. I would say the greatest spiritual practice that we do and have brought to the world is it's called a day off. Is that in the ancient world, if you could go to your boss and say, hey, I got a day off. There's no days off. The Jewish world felt that God was commanding us, take a day of rest. So the Sabbath, the sabbatical, today we take it for granted, right? Everybody gets a couple of days off. But in the ancient world, it wasn't so. So the Sabbath is a great, great spiritual tradition. And there's a book I want to recommend to all of you. It's called The Sabbath by Abraham Joshua Heschel. Abraham Joshua Heschel, called The Sabbath. And he talks about the Sabbath being a cathedral in time, that much of the world builds physical cathedrals. We build cathedral every Friday night and Saturday. So with that, let's do a little meditation, okay? So as we did at the very beginning, was that Dan who did that beautiful meditation before? So I want to ask you just to take a deep breath. You can keep your eyes closed or open, whatever you're most comfortable with. It's going to be a little guided meditation. Envision yourself outside in some beautiful area that surrounds your city. Go into nature, wherever it is, and envision those different elements in nature, the stream, the river, the lake, the trees, the flowers, the sky. And envision each one of those elements as being alive. Oh, not alive in the sense of speaking English or some language, but alive in the sense that they're your relatives. They're your relations. So imagine yourself looking at the lake or the river and greeting them. Doesn't have to be with words, maybe just with a nod of your head. Nod to the sky, nod to the horizon, to the sun, the moon, the river, the stream. Imagine then that all those elements in nature are self-organizing themselves. And one group says, we are water, the oceans, the rivers, the streams, the rain. Another one says, we are air, the clouds, the wind. A third group says, we are fire. We are the sun. We are the light. From earth, all the parts of earth, the mountains, the hills, all sitting next to the waters, all next to the air and the fire. And see these four groups as integrated together. The earth, the water, the air, and the fire. Not as individual gods and goddesses, but integrated and working together. Now look inside your own life. Envision your own body, the parts of you that are earth, like your skeletons that holds you up, the parts of you that are water, like your kidneys, your blood, the parts of you that respire, bring the spirit back in you, your lungs, and the parts of you that are fire, your mind. See yourself as integrated and whole. If you have an illness right now, locate where that illness is, take a breath, and see that illness. Let's say it's in your lungs. See your lungs as integrated with your mind and your physical body. Wherever that illness is, See it as integrated with the rest of your body, which can bring you some relief and some healing. One final part. We have nature outside. You have who you are inside. And now envision yourself, whoever you are, going outside and greeting the world. All your brothers and sisters, human beings of every religion, of every race, of every gender. See yourselves as greeting the world all around you. See yourself as part of the world and as integrated within yourself. Final clearing breath. Envision the divine, God, whatever you call God, Shekhinah, the Holy Spirit, the divine, as inside of you and outside of you, all around you. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'yimru amen. May the one who brings peace from the heavens bring peace to us and to the whole world. And we say, Amen. Hine ma tovu manaim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manaim shevet achim gam yachad. Behold how good and pleasant it is when friends can be together. In unity to dwell in unity to dwell in unity. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. What an honor to be with you today. Now, I can I ask a question?
Sure.
Isn't St. Louis, Missouri, don't you have the Negro League Museum in Kansas City?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I visited that museum about 20 years ago. I'm a big fan of Black integration of baseball. And so that's a wonderful museum.
Well, you wouldn't recognize it today. It's expanded since you were here.
Wow.
Much improved.
Yes. Thank you so much for that very educational and enlightening discussion of your faith. I heard several things that I resonated with, and I was surprised by a couple of things. I appreciate your perspective, and I'm sure the community will have many ideas and questions to talk with you about at Coffee Talk. So when we get to that point, David, if you're available to stick with us for a while, we'd be happy to have that conversation with you.
Thank you. And I think, Doug, did I say by accident St. Louis instead of Kansas City?
Right. Well, I think you thought we were in St. Louis, but we are actually in Kansas City, Missouri.
No, I knew you were in Kansas City. I made that error, so I'm sorry.
No worries. We get along with St. Louis most of the time.
Okay, good. Yes, I'll be hanging around for your coffee hour too. So
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.